What's the most creative punishment your parents gave to you? My mom created the wheel of punishment. When I would be naughty I would have to spin the Repo-Post board game spinner, and whatever punishment it landed was the punishment I had to do. If I slammed a door really hard when I was mad, my mom and grandparents would make me practice closing it nicely. I'd have to reopen and then close it gently about 50 times, counting each one out loud. If I closed it too hard I'd have to start over. At one point I learned to get my anger out by just slamming the door over and over and counting 1, 1, 1, 1 until I wasn't mad enough to keep slamming the door. They didn't utilize it as much when I started doing that, laughing my butt off. My dad once grounded both my sister and I. We were blaming each other when he decided to separate us. He came into my room and sat down on the bed before taking a deep breath and explaining that he knew my sister was the one to blame. He asked me how long I think he should ground her for. I said a couple of days. He then went to her room and told her the same thing. It was all my fault and he knew it. Asked her how long he should ground me for, and she said a month. So she got grounded for a month and I got grounded for a couple of days. Because that's what punishment we each thought was appropriate. She stopped being such a spiteful bitch after that. I'm curious. What were you two fighting over? He said that they found a dirty website on the computer history. I was sure it wasn't me because I always deleted the history. I was really good about that. So I denied it up and down. My sister was only 8 at the time. So I was surprised to know she was already looking into that stuff. Much later in my 20s I was discussing that punishment and my mom overheard it and remembered it vividly. She said it was a gay porn site. Otherwise she would have just assumed it was my dad. Apparently my dad was addicted to porn, probably still is, and it was starting to become a problem with their marriage. But he wasn't gay, so it was one of us. They coerced a confession out of my sister with the promise of letting her off early. My dad was really homophobic at the time and was really thankful it wasn't me. But you know, he grew up in the 70s. What are you gonna do? Edit to everyone saying that it was for sure my dad. She not only confessed, but as adults she's laughed about what she typed into Yahoo to find it. Men sex but LOL. Not for me, but for my younger brother. Got suspended from school. Can't remember the exact reason, but it led to a huge argument between him and my mum. He ended up shouting at her about how much he hated her and hating living here, and that even jail would be better than this. So my parents took out every piece of furniture and every item from his room aside from his bed. He had to sit in there for 5 days with nothing to entertain himself with, was allowed out 4 times a day to use the toilet. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner was decided by mum and put outside his door. He apologized quickly, but mum stuck to her decision. After the 5 days, he never complained about living here ever again. After a late night out of underage heavy drinking, my father got me up at 5 AM. Decided it was a good time for us to clean the garage thoroughly. I did most of the work for 3 hours. Then he took me to breakfast and discussed the error of my ways, promising more 5 AM chores anytime it happened again. It didn't happen again. I've been dying to tell this story. It wasn't me, but my best friend and her brother, when they were younger, would not stop fighting. Their parents tried everything. Taking their toys, early bedtime, grounding, can't see friends, etc. But they wouldn't stop. So one day their dad had the bright idea of putting them in the garage, sitting next to each other, while holding hands, while watching paint dry on a canvas. And every time they said something rude to each other, he poured a little more paint over the canvas. They were there for 4 hours, but they stopped fighting, so success. School bored me, so I'd often ditch and spend the day at bookstores, museums, or tagging along with an older sibling to sit in on his lecture hall classes at college. I got suspended a week for ditching. That's some logic. To prohibit me from going to school I was ditching. So my parents provided me as free lawn care for an entire month to an elderly neighbor. If I didn't do it, no allowance. So I did it. She was a nice lady anyway. After the punishment month was over, he gave me a list of other neighbors who would pay me to take care of their lawns. Turns out dad was going around the neighborhood talking to all of our other neighbors about what a good job I was doing for her. When I wanted to stop mowing lawns to get a real job in fast food like my friends, he had me figure out my hourly take home versus making minimum wage. I learned that I was making 5 times the amount they were per hour. Talk about opening my eyes to the entrepreneurial way. And since I was earning plenty of my own money, dad no longer gave me an allowance, which I suspect was his plan all along. Well played, father. Well played. See, you had an extremely different neighborhood. My neighbors wouldn't pay you a cent and either tell you up front or trick you into mowing and then lock the doors. Trick you into mowing and then lock the doors. That is a good way to get your windows smashed in my neighborhood. Kids don't ducking play. One time we shoveled a dude's driveway and walk out, and he tried to stiff us. We stopped working for the rest of the day to bury his house in snow. We shoveled all the other neighbors and dumped it on his walk. We had a great time throwing snowballs at his windows and burying him. My parents always made us repair things we broke. One day my sister and I were roughhousing, and we accidentally made a hole on the wall. So my dad drove us to Home Depot and told us that we both had to figure out on our own how to fix the hole. We had to talk to the employees on our own, ask our own questions, gather repair items, select paint color, and bought a home repair magazine on own. We then had to fix the hole on our own. We messed up a lot. It looked wonky and we picked the wrong paint color. We learned the value of taking care of our things. We realized how hard it was to fix things, and we learned new skills. All this without yelling, punishment, or a lecture. When I thought I was big and tough, after getting into an argument with my father, I told him that I didn't need him anymore. He simply goes downstairs and shuts off the power to my room. After hours of being stubborn and hot-headed, mind you. It was the middle of summer and I lived in the attic. I finally caved. I've never said anything like that to him ever again. Not me, but I had a co-worker whose son was 13 and had all the hallmarks of sulky teen. Her favorite punishment was making him sit next to her on the couch for a couple of hours while she did all of the best mom things. Hugging him, making bad jokes, etc. This was only for mild infractions, and from what I heard he was a pretty good kid who didn't get in major trouble. But she thought this punishment was hilarious, and I had to agree. Punish by smothering with mom love. A teenager's worst nightmare. Parents allowed me to get a mohawk when I was about 7, I think. But I started to act up, and my father said, "If you don't stop misbehaving, I will shave that damn thing off your head." I didn't take the warning to heart at all. Kept acting up, and sure enough he shaved my head. And that's how I ended up looking like I went through chemotherapy. My mother's words, not mine. A Friday night school dance when I was 15. A friend of mine had gotten his hands on a 5th of cherry vodka. The two of us drank the entire thing. I was a legless, drunken wreck at the dance. I don't remember anything about it. Luckily, I didn't puke and didn't get in trouble with the school authorities. My dad picked me up when the dance was over. Some friends had to help me stagger out to his car. Dad drove me home. Didn't say a word the whole time. He carried me upstairs and put me to bed. The next morning, bright and early at 7 AM, Dad kicked my door open. "Alright, get up. Here's what you're doing today." He had written out a huge list of chores. So my sick, hungover ass spent the entire day in the hot sun mowing the lawn, trimming trees, edging the driveway, and cleaning the garage. Dad brought the day to a close by driving me to the barber shop and getting me a nice, short haircut. Dad never once said a word about what all this was for. We didn't need to discuss it. We both knew. After my haircut, Dad took me out for pizza. While we ate, Dad just chatted about ordinary things. I don't think I spoke a word the entire day. Between the hangover and the embarrassment, I was in a state of shock. I think he was trying to let me know he knew how I felt, and I was pretty sure he had been in my position once or twice before. After we ate, Dad drove us home, and I went to bed and slept for 16 hours. I actually felt okay when I got up the next day, and from that point on, Dad and I were back to normal life. I could look him in the eye again. The event was never spoken of. I don't know what dad ever told my mom about it. All in all, I think it was a good thing. I was stupid and reckless and I got punished hard for it. But I got punished fairly and not with cruelty and anger. And I came out of it with more respect for my dad than I had before. As far as punishments go, it was the best one I ever had, although I would never, ever want to go through it again. And I guess that was the whole point. I used to pick on my brother, and one time I made him cry, so my mum punished me by making 2 bowls of ice cream for dessert and giving them both to my brother and making me watch him eat them both. As children of a single mum, we didn't get a lot of sweets, so it was doubly painful. I was 17 and had a good relationship with my dad. I was going to be late getting to an event, and he told me, "Drive safely and don't drive over the speed limit." I said, "Trust me." 30 minutes later, I was pulled over on the side of the highway after driving more than 40 km/h over the speed limit. What I didn't know was that the police officer had phoned my dad and asked if I was allowed to drive the car insured in my dad's name. When I got home 5 hours later, there was a note on my bedroom door: "Trust." What does that mean? I turned over the keys the next morning and asked how long my punishment would last. Dad said, "What punishment?" I felt horribly guilty for breaking trust, and the lack of punishment made me feel worse. I drove more carefully and slowly and worked so hard to regain his trust as a parent. Now, I look back on that and emulate the relationship we had with my own children. I was in 3rd grade, got in trouble at school, and was suspended for 3 days. In the past, my mom would just spank me, put me on punishment at home, i.e., no TV, extra chores, etc. But since spankings didn't really work for me, she got creative and decided to have me come to work with her all 3 days of my suspension. She worked at a community center. While at work with her, I had to work on some math and reading workbooks, handwrite an apology letter to my teacher for being bad, which she would proofread, edit and make me rewrite correctly, and worst of all, I had to practice my piano lessons in the staff lounge as her coworkers were coming in and out throughout the day getting coffee or eating lunch. It was pure torture. My mum wouldn't just take my Gamma Boy away for a couple of days or something. She knew her way around Pokemon Yellow too, so she would threaten to release my highest level Pokemon if I was bad. I had a fight with my brother, so I immediately stashed the Charizard I was working on in the PC. She took the Gamma Boy and sure enough, released it. I was a really good kid. When I first got my car, I made the mistake of driving home from a party drunk as duck. My mom heard me stumble in and put me right to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a tow truck outside my house. My mom told me that because I couldn't be responsible or trusted with a car, she was selling it back to the dealership. I cried hysterically. They towed it away after about a week of walking to school in the cold and rain, apologizing profusely, taking a safe driving course, and missing my car. My mom finally gave up and told me she didn't actually sell the car. She had it towed to my aunt's house and they stored it in the garage. My aunt lives a 10-minute walk from my house. My mom paid $75 to tow my car 7 blocks just to make a point. It worked. I've never taken my car or my mom for granted, nor have I ever driven under any influence ever again. She's a petty bitch, but damn if it didn't serve its point. I can honestly say my parents didn't give me any creative punishments, but I have a boy and a girl now, young adults. When they were little they were best friends. They also shared a bedroom and got along great, but when they would fight and it got ugly, I would send them both to their room for 1 hour and told them they couldn't come out until they came up with a really good secret handshake. They would forget that they were mad at each other and start immediately working on a handshake. I would hear them laughing their heads off while they were doing it. They would come out an hour later, show me this super long fun handshake, synchronized to the minute. I would congratulate them for their hard work and then they would go back to playing. It still brings a smile to my face. My mom pointed out to me that this wasn't really punishment. I told her I wasn't trying to punish them, I just wanted them to stop fighting. And it worked every time. It was about a month out from my birthday and I really wanted to know what I was getting. I kept harassing my mom to give me some sort of hint, like over the top begging. My mom stood up, walked out of the house to the garage, came back in, and tossed me my present, which was a copy of Space Jam on VHS. She said, "Here, have fun opening no presents on your birthday." I was immediately incredibly disappointed that I had just ruined my own birthday, and from that day on never wanted to find out what presents I got. I did get more stuff than just that for my birthday, but it was one of the big presents and made the day feel more hollow. My mom called it the Stone Age punishment, and it heckin' worked. She took away every piece of digital technology I owned, and each week with good grades I was able to earn back something. Starting with my radio. I never remember music sounding as good as it did that day. My grades went up because I had nothing to do but my homework, and I became really creative because after homework there was nothing left to do but draw and write. At some point my parents did this when I was heavily relying on online contact with friends. First I used an old phone to stay in contact, but when I wasn't able to, my stupid head figured the most entertaining thing was cutting myself. Still weird to think back at how easily I just did that back then. When my parents found out, they kinda realized removing me from my social life wasn't great, and started trying to help me with things like my gaming addiction and self-hate instead of just punishing me. My brother and I used to bicker. It was never anything that turned physical, but we'd snipe at each other constantly with insults and complaining. Mom and dad finally had enough, so they made us stand side by side with our non-dominant hands. I'm a righty, he's a lefty, and tied us together. We were then told to clean the kitchen after dinner. It was difficult, but we were laughing about it by the time everything was clean. We still tease each other, but it's never malicious anymore. As kids, we were spanked for disobeying. Eventually, swats on the but don't hurt enough to be corrective. So dad moved on to something more painful for between the wallet. Every time we failed to take the trash out on time or cut the grass before it rained, we were fined $25. We were told it went into the vacation fund, so it wasn't like the money was gone from our lives. When I turned 18, dad sat me down in his office and handed me an envelope stuffed with bank statements. Turns out he was investing every one of those 25 fines into a mutual fund. I'm now 28, and it's still sitting there growing in case of a rainy day. I kinda regret not screwing up more as a kid. The account could have been bigger. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.